This example, we're going to be exploring the entries iterator, so how we can move through the different items within the array of the entries. And as we set up the iterator, so we're calling it adder, and then we can move through, and getting the value is going to actually return back the array of contents that we have with the index value as the first item in the array, and then the second is going to be the actual value of the item in the array. So we can use a for loop and loop through adder and then console log out each one of the items. And the reason we're using 1 as the index, because that's going to represent the actual value within the array, and we're just outputting it into the console. The other format is using a while loop. So this one looks a little bit more complex, where we're selecting and getting the entries, and as soon as we use the next method within the iterator, that's going to remove that content, that item. So we need to set a variable with the value of the callback response from adder1 next, which is going to be the first entry. We check to see if it has a value. If it does have a value, then we're going to select the value using the index value of 1. If we use 0, then that's going to be the index value of the item in the first original array. And then we set the value of val to be adder1 and move to the next item. And once there are no additional next items in the array, once it's moved through all of the items, then this while loop will stop looping through. And that's where we get the output of each item that we have within the array in the console. We're going to look at the array entries. So for that, we're going to need to have an array, and then we'll get all of the values that are contained within the array. So I'm just going to add in a couple string values into the array. In addition, we can have a numeric value there. So that will give us 3 values that we've got within the array. And now we want to do an iterator through the array. So let's select the array content. And I'll just call that adder. So this is going to be the iterator of the array. And then we can take the array object and get the entries. And if we console log out what we have for adder, that will provide us an array iterator. So that means that we can move through to see if an array has a next item. So in order to get the next value that's contained within the array, we could move it through and we can use the next. So if within the console log, take the adder and return back whatever the next item is. So it's going to return back this object where we've got value, so the index and the value of the item in the array. So we can see the value by getting the value number of the item in the array and save that. So that's going to return back the value, and the value, once again, it's just going to be the index value and the actual value from the item in the array. So if we do a next and then we do value, what gets returned back is going to be the second item in the array. So once you use the next, it's already going to move on to the next value. So every time you use the next method, it's going to move through to the next item in the array. So that's where we're seeing that when we're doing next value, we're getting with the index value of 1 and the second item in the array that's being returned back. So in order to use this, we can also use this within a loop, where we can use it within a while loop for checking to see if there's additional items in the loop, and then looping through each one of them. So let's do that, where we've got a for loop, and the item will be represented, and then do a for of loop, so looping through the adder iterator. And then within the console, let's output the item, and we'll see what we get for the item of the array. So that lists out each one of them that we have within the array with the index and the property value. So if we want to get the actual value, then we can use the index value of 1, and now we're going to return back the values from the array. So this is another way that you can loop through the contents of an array, where you can set it up as the entries. Let's set this up as a while loop, and we'll create another iterator there. So we can't use this one anymore, because right now, after we've looped through adder is not going to have a next value, so that's going to be emptied out. The iterator is going to be emptied out of the values, so we don't have a next value, so we've got a length of 0, whereas initially we do have a length there, or we can use the next. So if we do try to use next, and we see what we get returned back here, we're going to get a value of undefined because there's nothing left there as we've already iterated through the adder. So that's where we need to create another iterator, and we'll show you how you can use this within the while loop. So using the adder 1, and we can create it out of the same trees. Let's set the value of val as adder 1, and then use the next method, and it will loop through while the value of val exists, and then within the while loop can set it up to get the next value. And then here we'll just console log out what we have for the value of val. So that will list out all 3 of the items that we have within the array. And if we want to select the actual value, then we can return it back using the index value. So the val is actually returning back the array, and this will allow us to iterate through all the items of the array and output them into the console. So that's using while, that's using a for loop, and this is how you can just move through the different items that are available within the array object.